So we're going to start today talking about one of the all-time goats, Marie Sklodowska, who later becomes known as Marie Curie. Now, Marie Sklodowska is born in Poland, and Poland at this period of time is an occupied state. Poland's a really small country, it's near a lot of more powerful countries, and it is fairly common in Polish history for it to be conquered. During this period of time, it is under Russian occupation. So occupation refers to when a foreign power is in control of somebody else's land, and oftentimes is enacting lots of oppressive rules there. So Poland is under Russian occupation. Under this Russian occupation, there is an attempt by the Russians to control what kind of things people in Poland can do, what kind of people they can be, and if you want to control a country, one of the best ways of doing that is to try to control that country's future by controlling its children. So among the oppressive policies that begin to take root in occupied Poland under Russian oppression is the control of the school systems. The Russian occupiers control how education is taught in Poland. Yes?
They weren't allowed to teach in Polish, right?
They weren't allowed to teach in Polish. They had to be taught in Russian. They no longer are learning things like Polish history and Polish literature. Instead, if Marie Sklodowska goes to school, she's going to be taught Russian history and Russian literature. Because the idea is the Russians are trying to say, hey, actually, this is our land. It was always our land. You're not Polish. There is no such thing as being Polish. You are Russian, and when we teach you in Russian, we teach you Russian history, Russian language. Actually, that's just teaching you your stuff. It's an attempt to erase a culture, right? As part of this control of the educational system, when they move over to the Russian curriculums, one of the things that is not as emphasized in Russian schools, but was heavily emphasized in Polish schools, is laboratory science was not valued under the Russian educational system. Marie Sklodowska's dad had been a laboratory teacher, like he taught things like chemistry, and he taught them, with lab equipment where students would actually get to do experiments. Marie Sklodowska's family has a history of being Polish revolutionaries. Her grandparents fought the Russians when they tried to take over. They failed in that attempt to stop the Russians. And as a result, Marie Sklodowska's family has lost most of their money. They no longer have as stable a financial basis. And to top things off, her dad loses his job because he's now no longer allowed to teach laboratory science. But when he leaves the school, he takes all the lab equipment home with him because the school doesn't need that anymore. They're getting rid of it. So he actually sets up his own lab equipment. He teaches his daughters things like chemistry and physics with that equipment that has been taken from the schools. Now, Poland, as I said, has a long history of being occupied. And there are some, Polish institutions that historically will sort of come out of the woodwork whenever this happens. And one of them is this thing called the Floating University. Floating University is so cool. I love the Floating University. It makes me so happy that when people thought, how do we resist occupation? One of the things that they thought of as this is what is important to do in order to be able to resist was we should be able to control our own education. And that's what the Floating University was for. The Floating University does not have a campus. It doesn't have a set faculty. There's no place you can go to and be like, now I'm at the Floating University. It is an illegal, underground educational institution. The way it works is people quietly pass the word around and they're like, hey, come at 2 a.m. to old Garslaw's farm. There's going to be a lecture on physics in his barn. And folks will gather in secret to learn the things that have been forbidden to them, or just to have access to an education, right? And then when you're there, you might get the word, okay, the next lecture is going to be, in Jenny's basement at 4 a.m. on Sunday, right? Come sneak in, and we'll have our lessons there. So this is an illegal, underground, secret, revolutionary educational institution. Y'all can see why I love this. But that is how Marie Sklodowska gets the majority of her education, is through this floating university. So she has very strong feelings of Polish identity. Her identity as somebody who's from Poland is deeply important to her, and she is really fighting to have access to education. Yes, go see.
Why is she also known as Marie Curie then?
That's the name she'll take when she gets married.
Oh.
But in this point in the story, she hasn't gotten married yet, so she's still Marie Skłodowska. All right. And I think it's important to remember that she is from Poland, because oftentimes she's discussed as just being French. And people tend to erase that part of her sometimes when they tell the story. So, Marie Curie would like, or Marie Skłodowska would like very much to go to university. She does want to be able to like actually attend classes without it being, in the middle of the night under the cover of darkness and in secret. But the problem is she doesn't have much money, and if she wants to travel to a different country to get a university education, that's an expensive, difficult thing to do. So she and her sister, Bronislawa, make a pact. And the pact is that Marie Curie is going to go to work and support her sister through medical school. And then her sister will go to work to support Marie Curie through her or Marie Skłodowska through her college. And this is exactly what they do. They both move to Paris. Marie works as a governess, which is like a babysitter / tutor, right? Where you're both helping to educate somebody's kids and taking care of them. Is paid very little, is putting almost all of her money into supporting her sister through med school, absurdly poor, barely scraping by, but she does manage to put her sister through school, and then her sister does indeed pay the favor and help pay for her to get her own education. So Marie Skłodowska is able to get a proper university degree thanks to the support of her family. Yes, Nyan?
Wait, so her sister became like something in the medical field, so she stayed afloat better than Marie.
So Marie at first is supporting Bronislawa, and then Bronislawa helps to support Marie.
Yeah, no, but Marie had like a very low paying job and barely scraped by.
Yeah.
So, but since her sister became a medical professional,
Yeah.
she it was easier for her.
It's going to be a long time before Marie reaches like financial security, but once her sister is a doctor, things do get a little bit better. All right. So she's looking for a place where she can have a lab and start doing experiments. And somebody's like, "Oh, I know exactly who you need to talk to. Let me introduce you to my friend Pierre." Pierre is a young Frenchman. God bless Pierre. What a mensch. Just like truly an excellent human being. He is introduced to Marie. At first they just start sort of working in the same laboratory space, but pretty quickly Pierre realizes, oh, Marie's work is going places that mine just isn't. This is actually way more important what she's working on. He gives up the work that he's currently doing and decides he's going to support her full time. And they do eventually fall in love and get married, and the two are working together.
So it was, his last name was Curie?
Yes, so Pierre Curie. At this point on, now we have Marie Curie. Yeah, Shaq.
What was her name before she got married?
Skłodowska, which I can write for you.
Yeah.
It's S.K. Skłodowska. I think there might be some markings over one of the O's, and I unfortunately cannot remember the exact proper spelling. But this is her last name. So, she and her husband are at work in this lab space that he's able to procure for them. They are really interested in these things that have been discovered by a guy named Henri Becquerel called X-rays. It's some kind of emission that is coming from uranium. Yes?
Did Marie Skłodowska, was she already doing work and, did she build off of Henry Becquerel?
Yes.
Did
So
she do that before?
Henri Becquerel discovers X-rays. Marie and Pierre are going to explain how they work.
So she doesn't really do that much before she marries Pierre?
Oh, she does. There's loads of stuff that she accomplishes,
Like
right?
what?
I'm going to cover just a handful of the highlights, but she does a ton of really important work. She's one of the all-time greatest scientists.
But before she marries
Oh yeah, she does work beforehand, but pretty quickly he starts working along with her. Yes.
How do you spell Henri's last name?
Her original last name is right here.
No, the person who created X-rays.
Oh, Becquerel, it's up here
Oh.
in the yellow block at the beginning of the yellow block.
I think you.
All right, so Marie is interested in these things called X-rays. Now, there's something really weird about them. And to explain why this thing is weird, I need to tell you a little bit about chemistry. We know that in chemistry there are elements, and we can bond atoms of those elements together to make molecules of a particular chemical. The thing that's true in chemistry is the elements that make up a chemical oftentimes have really different properties from the chemical itself. For example, sodium metal explodes in water. Chlorine gas is a deadly neurotoxin. But when you put a sodium atom and a chlorine atom together, you get delicious table salt. Hydrogen gas, explosive. Oxygen gas, something you have to breathe. But hydrogen and oxygen together makes water, which is not really at all like hydrogen gas or oxygen gas. So usually, chemicals are going to have really different properties from the elements that make up those chemicals. The thing about these X-rays is that the X-rays come from literally any chemical that has uranium in it. It doesn't matter what the chemical is. If uranium is one of the atoms that makes up those molecules, it releases these X-rays. So what Marie Curie is able to determine from this is that the X-rays are a thing that's happening from the individual uranium atoms. She's able to figure out that it's the uranium atoms kind of breaking down that releases these X-rays. Now, she's able to basically figure out how radioactivity works. She figures out what radiation is, and that it's something that happens from atoms decaying. Now, this is really important, groundbreaking work. This is absolutely, unquestionably, Nobel Prize worthy work. Yes?
And she discovers this after she marries Pierre?
Yes, they are married, they're working together in this one.
And they discover it together, or she marries?
It's mostly her work, he is assisting her in this one. So, Pierre has a friend on the Nobel Prize Committee. And that friend gives him a tip and says, hey, Pierre, I have great news for you. The Nobel Prize Committee is planning on awarding the Nobel Prize in Physics this year to Henri Becquerel and you for your work on X-rays. And Pierre goes, excuse me, what? They want to give me an award for this? This is my wife's work. Now, I want to be really clear about something. Winning the Nobel Prize would be a life-changing thing for Pierre and Marie. It comes with a significant cash prize that could move them from this place of like not quite poor but also financially not secure into a place of financial security where they can really fund their lab, where they can do all the research they're wanting to do. This would single-handedly change their lives. They've got kids at this point. It would mean they'd be able to ensure that their kids would get a good education. This would solve so many of their problems. The Nobel Prize Committee has never in its history given a Nobel Prize to a woman. Never, ever. So for this family, even if the prize goes to the wrong person, it would still be a life-changing thing. But what Pierre does is something deeply brave. He writes to the Nobel Prize Committee and says, we all know that this is the work that's going to win a Nobel Prize and that this is the work that deserves a Nobel Prize. If you try to give this prize to me and not my wife, I will publicly reject the prize, turn it down, drag your name through the mud, and make the biggest stink about this and how you have snubbed my wife that anyone has ever seen. And he is able to threaten the Nobel Prize Committee, and they reverse course. And for the first time in their history, the Nobel Prize goes to a woman. It goes to Henri, Pierre, and Marie Curie. So all three of them split the prize money and get that Nobel Prize. It's the first time a Nobel Prize has ever been awarded to a woman. It was well deserved. So that's Marie Curie's first Nobel Prize in physics.
Has it now been awarded to more women?
It has, although I will say this problem is not solved. The Nobel Prize Committee has a history of doing things like awarding the Nobel Prize to women's partners, like they tried to do with Pierre. It also has a history of waiting until women die, because they only give the prize to living people. And so on multiple occasions, they've literally just waited for a woman to die and then immediately given the prize to a man working in the same field. So for example, on the wall over there, you can see a picture of Vera Rubin. Vera Rubin's the woman who discovered dark matter. Really big deal. And for decades, folks were saying, why doesn't Vera Rubin have a Nobel Prize yet? Why haven't you given a Nobel Prize in dark matter? Dark matter is really important. Why haven't you given a Nobel Prize for this? The Nobel Prize Committee literally waited till she died, and then 2 years later gave a Nobel Prize for dark matter to a male.
Wait, why is
And
that?
what he did.
He did further work with dark matter.
Why what was I gonna say?
Why did they do this?
No, it was how do you win a Nobel Prize? Like, what
Uh,
work?
By doing incredible contributions to the field of science. All right, so she's won her first Nobel Prize, they get a bunch of money, they're able to expand their laboratory, really dig into things, family's thriving. Her next big project is she's studying this stuff called pitch blende, which is an ore, so it's like something you would mine. It's not a pure thing of one element, it's a mixture of lots of different elements together. And the pitch blende is radioactive. And at first folks were like, yeah, it makes sense. It's got uranium in it. We know it has uranium in it. So of course it's radioactive. But what Marie Curie realizes is based on how much uranium is in pitch blende, it's way more radioactive than it should be. So she spends a long time sort of figuring out how to separate out all the different elements that make up pitch blende. And she's able to discover 2 new elements, radium, which she calls that because it's radioactive, and polonium, which she calls that because it's named after her native Poland. Yes, Yossi?
Is this before or after Dmitry Mendeleev?
After.
Okay, so does that mean were those the 2 elements?
No, it's actually a completely different set of elements that he predicts. I don't remember exactly which ones, but it's not those 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were those elements already found before these 2?
No, these are new elements. Nobody's discovered them
The
before.
ones that he predicted?
Yes, those ones I believe are. Raphael? Yes, you can. All right. So Marie Curie discovers 2 new elements. She wins her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry. She is the only person in the history of the Nobel Prize who has ever won 2 different Nobel Prizes in 2 different subjects of science. Nobody else has ever done it. Her family continues to consist of incredible scientists. I believe her daughter Irene might win a Nobel Prize at some point, but her family then profits.
How old is Irene?
I don't remember. I don't know how old she was when she won her Nobel Prize.
Still
Her
alive.
family then what?
Her family's able to thrive because now they have the money with that Nobel Prize money.
Yeah.
And
How much is it?
it's significant. It's like a big old chunk of money. All right. So that is the story of Marie Curie. Now, from this point on, every single lady that you're going to see will at some point have been referred to as the blank Marie Curie. So when we talk about Chen Sheng Wu, she's going to be referred to as the Chinese Marie Curie. When we talk about Lise Meitner, she, despite being Austrian, is referred to as the German Marie Curie. But let's talk about Lise Meitner.